Hello, student veterans of America. It was so great to be with you recently at NatCon 2021, where I got to talk to you about personal branding and reputation management and all the ways that job searching and career building have changed last year and into this year. We talked a lot about the job search changes that are coming in 2021. And I know we ran out of time at the end to answer some of your questions. So I wanted to take a moment and address the ones that really popped up for me that I think really deserve a response. One of you asked, what about when people think your elevator pitch sounds too ambitious? And is that something only men deal with, or do only women deal with that? I think to answer that, I don't believe it's a male or a female issue. I think it's how you're presenting yourself and perhaps the language that you're using. So if you think it's too pushy, it probably is. If you're getting feedback that you're being too ambitious or too aggressive, take that feedback and consider whether there are different words you could choose to describe who you are and what you're passionate about, or whether you're delivering that elevator pitch to the wrong audience. Being too ambitious in your messaging is typically a sign of overexuberance or maybe even desperation, and neither of those is typically attractive to a target audience. So consider the person you're speaking to, consider the message you want to get across, and make sure that the two of those match up. Another question, is there a link to your LinkedIn Learning courses? And yes, if you go to LinkedIn Learning and you search by my name as an author or instructor, you'll see all the courses that I have in the library under LinkedIn Learning. And as a student veteran, I would encourage you to take as many courses, mine and other people's, on LinkedIn Learning, because it's going to show you what the narrative, what the cultural nuances of different professions and different courses looks like. And I know for myself, I really tried to build on the different courses that I taught. So if you take my really popular Creating Your Personal Brand course, and then you take my course on internal interviewing, or then you follow it up with a course on having an honest conversation with your boss, you're going to really see how these courses build on each other. Another person asked, how often should I update or change my branding? Well, I'm not a fan of changing your branding often. I think there are times when we have to mature or evolve our positioning, right? If when you're starting out in your career, maybe you have more of that youthful exuberance, and then as you get further into your professional life, you want to temper that perhaps depending on the kind of work that you do. I update my marketing and my graphics and my website and my marketing materials based on current trends that align with my value, but I keep things relatively consistent because I don't want someone who's held onto my business card from 5 years ago to feel like they're getting a very different person if they go to my website today. So I think we need to keep our branding and positioning current. I think it has to be relevant to the target audience that we're speaking to. And if that changes, it might be important to then pivot or modify your positioning. But we really don't change our branding as often as you might think. There's that concept people use called reinventing themselves. And I don't like that because it makes it sound like you're completely changing things out. I change my hairstyle. I change the glasses I wear when I am on the computer. I might change my wardrobe, but I don't change who I am. And I want to make sure that the values and the credibility that I'm establishing in all the audiences I work stays consistent. So it's fine to update and refresh and keep things current, but make sure you're not changing the fundamental underlying foundation of who you are. Finally, somebody asked, how do you mitigate if someone has a negative perception of you? Wow, that is a big question. I appreciate our friend for asking that, and I wish I could give you the short answer. I actually do have a book coming out in May that really talks about the concept of reputation repair, because that's become a lot of my work in the last probably 5 to 7 years. Many people find themselves having a negative perception of themselves, either because they did something wrong, maybe they weren't paying attention, maybe people formed judgments and perception without having all the information. Maybe you were caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and maybe you did nothing wrong, but you were made to be a scapegoat. We're seeing more and more of that. So if somebody has a negative perception of you, it absolutely should get addressed. It's important to understand fact from emotion. First thing, separate those two out. Are you upset about it and therefore want to act? Or is it really a perception that's causing damage to your career viability? Because if it's just hurt feelings, we might need to manage that differently. But let's say people are taking attack at you online and in person, and your opportunities being afforded have suddenly stopped. Well, that's a pretty good indication that something's going wrong. I would, again, try to separate fact from emotion, try to understand what the genesis of the problem is. Did somebody form an opinion based on not all the information or misinformation? What do you have control over and what don't you have control over? People bring emotional biases, cultural filters, all sorts of preconceived ideas into conversation with us. And sometimes those are what start us forming negative perceptions. It's important to understand that some of that we don't have control over. But the other thing to understand is that you have the ability to move forward. If you need to take accountability and ownership because you did something wrong and maybe you haven't made amends for it with that person, that could be a powerful first step. Now, I don't suggest doing that online always, but sometimes it is important. Taking accountability is usually a good thing to do once you've determined that that would be a remedy towards forward progress. But the reputation repair answer isn't a one-size-fits-all. There isn't a formula for each situation. So I'd encourage you to think about what's really going on. Is this hurt feelings or is your career viability really damaged? Is this an online search problem or is it word of mouth and rumor? One of the things I'm also finding right now is this idea of typecasting. So somebody starts with an organization and maybe they don't get off on the right foot, or maybe they befriend the wrong people, or they say something kind of, without thinking at the beginning. And people remember that and they hold on to that. There are ways to move through that and build the credibility. Let people see who you are and what you're really passionate about and what you value. Bring that forward often, and it may take repetitive behavior here. It might take many, many attempts before people are willing to consider that their first impression of you isn't necessarily the right one. So again, these were just a few of the questions that came in that I wanted to make sure that we got a chance to answer. Great seeing you all, student veterans across the country. Actually, I think we had some internationals there too. Please keep questions coming to me. I do write for military.com, and if I can't address your question here, I might be able to address it in an article. So best of luck. Thank you for your service, and hopefully I'll see you again next year at NatCon 2022.